Hello, everybody. So today I want to talk about Tesla, and I also want to talk about Stellantis. And there's nothing bad about Stellantis. It's a legacy automaker, right? In the US, you may know them as Jeep and as Ram. They make these trucks, right? In Europe, they would make the Citroën, the Peugeot cars, etc. Bunch of brands, old conglomerate. This is not about singling out Stellantis or any legacy auto player. This is just that the news today was very disparate out here in the US. Of course, every single outlet was reporting that Tesla's disappointed. Tesla disappointed on their deliveries because they came in a few hundred vehicles short compared to what some of the analysts had on the street, and it depends on your source. But of course, the media being the media, they were quick to report that, it's falling short of the expectation of the one group of analysts that they had decided to highlight so that it would look bad for Tesla. But of course, when you look over the longer and you calculate, Tesla's actually is year over year. So if you compare Q3 of this year, Q3 of 24, against Q3 of 23, the deliveries are actually up 7% year over year for Tesla. And, I find it, comical that it's up and the headlines are just negative, all negative. And we also had headlines about Stellantis, which is why I choose Stellantis in this video. That was the other headline of the day. Well, their deliveries are down too, and so that's fair that they would write a negative article about that, but they're down way worse than Tesla. It's minus 20% year over year for Stellantis, right? Maker of Jeep, Chrysler, minus 20% in deliveries year over year. So the delta, and of course, interest rates are hurting both companies. Like any company in the auto sector is being hurt by interest rates right now. But the delta is at 27%. There's a 27% difference between Stellantis, i.e. Jeep, Ram, and between Tesla. And it's furthermore interesting that, of course, those big Ram trucks, right? They compete head-to-head against the Cybertruck. Same for the big Jeeps, these cars that don't really go too well through the air. They compete against the Teslas. These are storied brands, at least when it comes to Jeep. It's an old storied brand. So it's somewhat of a fair comparison, but I'm not taking Stellantis. I'm not singling them out. I could have used Ford or whatever. Anyways, I think the delta is fascinating. And when you go back in time, of course, it's unfair to go back 10 years, because if you go back more than 10 years for Tesla, you will see the sales will be well above a 10x. So they were beginning from such a small base. So it's a little unfair, but it's not unfair to go back 10, 15 years for the Stellantis group, which is, Fiat Chrysler, Fiat, Opel in Europe, right? PSA in Europe, and now Stellantis. All of these kind of legacy automakers put together, when you put them all together, you can see at their peak in 2007, they were selling 10 million vehicles. Now they are selling worldwide 5.84 million vehicles. That was in 2022. That has dropped, right? We know in the US is 20%. So what are they at now? Are they at 4.5 million now in 2024? Probably something like that. And Tesla is going to hit likely or close to it. They're going to do about 2 million this year. So Tesla is almost half of the total cars that are sold by Stellantis. But of course, Stellantis is an assembler of cars. It's a manufacturer of cars. It deals with, it uses dealership. It uses tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. It has a network of suppliers. It's a legacy company in the auto sector. It's a mess. It's siloed. It's fragmented. Tesla is one block, one company, and of course, not only do they do the cars, but what do we know? They have two other divisions that are ramping and scaling. One of them is the storage deployment, and thank you for Sawyer Merritt for putting that together. For storage deployment, they're showing a clear beginning of an S-curve, a clear beginning of an exponential, and then Tesla Energy tweeted this 2 days ago. That's 1 day ago, actually. Yesterday, they tweeted this: 750 power walls installed. That's their home energy storage division. Again, beginning of that S-curve, beginning of that exponential. So Tesla really has three main product line, which right now are getting adopted. And so to me, the trends are so clear. One of them is in a virtuous circle, more adoption, fueling more growth. And one of them is in a vicious cycle, less adoption, leading to more closures, less growth, less success, less innovation. It's a loop that you can't really get out of. And same for Tesla. They are in that snowball, that flywheel that they've launched, and it's also tough to remove that inertia up, just like it's tough for Stellantis to remove the inertia down. I like these analogies of the flywheel, right? That was the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, right? That informed companies like Amazon, for example, and how they work. And I was going to do a comparison of the balance sheet, and yet again, it is not fair to do a comparison of the balance sheet between the two companies, because Tesla is still more expensive than Stellantis. Even if you remove all of the bad from the Stellantis balance sheet, Tesla is still more expensive. But as we'll see in a minute, it's more expensive mostly because of the expectations about AI. That's the reason for that overvaluation, not the current business, in my view. So yes, of course, Tesla looks much more expensive than Stellantis, but I do still want to point out a little bit of the issues of looking at the balance sheet of legacy companies in the auto sector. Because here's the thing, if the goodwill, well, in the case of Stellantis, that is not the case. Their goodwill is actually pretty low, believe it or not, for a conglomerate. Or if the intangibles, for their case, if those just happen to not be worth what the accountants think this is worth, then you may have a company with no EV, no enterprise value. I mean, because goodwill, what is goodwill, right? Goodwill is overpaying for an acquisition. It's what you've overpaid, and it's considered, right? Goodwill is considered to represent things like customer loyalty, things like a skilled workforce, things like future synergies or brand reputation, right? What's the brand reputation of Jeep? What's the brand reputation of Opel? Intangible. Goodwill is a form of intangible that you cannot amortize, right? And so goodwill, you reassess it every year. And if by mistake goodwill is overestimated and you need to reassess it, that may lead to huge losses. Goodwill is dangerous to have on a balance sheet, and I'm sure Charlie Munger would not agree with me on this, but it's perhaps, he calls EBITDA BS earnings, right? Perhaps I would be very quick to call goodwill and to call over intangible BS assets on the balance sheet. The same could be said for an inventory. If your inventory is a gas car that nobody wants, that has been sitting on lots for years and nobody wants them, then you need to mark down that inventory. These are risky businesses, and as you reassess the balance sheet, you could really quickly see large amounts of value being wiped out. Now, in the case of Tesla, you could argue to a lesser extent that the inventory could lose some value, like it's possible when they do a Model 3 versus Model 3 refresh. The old Model 3s may lose their value, but Tesla has a very small inventory at all times. But you certainly can't argue that for the goodwill or the intangible of Tesla. They have literally essentially none on the balance sheet. I mean, they did a few acquisitions, hence the goodwill, but they have essentially none of these intangibles on the balance sheet. So you don't have any quote-unquote BS assets, which you do in a lot of the legacy groups in the form of goodwill and intangibles, right? Intangibles are things like your trademarks, things like your dealer networks, right? They count as value. They count the dealer networks as value on the balance sheet. What? It's like, anyways, I think it's important to look at how these enterprises are valued and how these things work, because yes, there's a lot, and I didn't even get into the liabilities and the breakdown on the liabilities and the issue of owner of revenue financing, right? The issue of, say, a company, you have GM and then you have GM Financial, and you're going to issue debt in order for your customer to go buy the truck. Except what if the customer decides to let go of the truck and get the truck repossessed, and when you get the truck back, you find out that you thought that truck was going to be worth $60,000 after a few years, but the truck is only worth $20,000 because you overestimated the future value of a vehicle, right? There's a bunch of issues that I want to stay clear out of. And again, I'm not singling out Stellantis. I could put any legacy auto in the mix. I want to stay out of these issues, stay clear, and have a clean story focusing on the growth, focusing on the product adoption, on the S-curve. Another way to look at it, and I think it'd be important to look at it, is, of course, the CAPM of finance. What does it tell you? Well, the stock price, right? The stock price is supposed to represent the present value of all future cash flows. And when you look at the value of a company like Tesla compared to a company like Stellantis, and of course, Tesla is quote unquote overvalued compared to a Stellantis, of course. But not if you look at the present value of the future cash flows and you assume a reasonable amount of success. These are all of kind of quote unquote the more tangible or the more realistic future businesses of Tesla. So we mentioned they have 3 businesses that are ramping right now, where the ramp has begun. I meant to say exponential here. So the ramp has begun for the auto business, the ramp has begun for the power business, and the ramp has begun for the Megapack business. So sure enough, these 3, you would hope, are already in the present value of the future cash flows, but there's businesses that have not ramped at all that also are likely to be present in the present value of Tesla, such as the truck business, such as the FSD licensing business, right? It could be on 1010, we could have one or even more than one legacy automakers licensing FSD for Tesla. The robotaxi business, right? Much of the valuation of Tesla these past few years has been about the robotaxi business. That's not put in. The supercharger network business, they own the gas stations of the next era of vehicles in these superchargers. That revenue has not started ramping up yet. The insurance business, that hasn't ramped yet. The AI business and inference business using all of the computers on all these cars, that has not ramped up yet. And I could put in there also the energy storage in those cars. And of course, the theme of 1010, which is going to be the introduction of likely a new version of the robot, of the Optimus robot. Of course, that is not represented in the present value of Tesla, and I would argue perhaps the bot business perhaps will be the latest to ever be represented in the present value of Tesla. This is going to be dismissed for many, many, many years to come. In fact, I'm sure some of you in the comment section will be very quick to dismiss the bot. But right now, opportunities though, and if you had the robotaxi, you likely can explain that market cap, and perhaps you only explain just a portion of the market cap, meaning that the value you come up with is already much higher just by looking at the future, the bright future of these businesses. So Tesla is trading on its prospects, it's trading on its bright future. And I also want to introduce something else that I think it's unfair to compare a company like Tesla to any legacy automakers, because as a 21st century company, Tesla is vertically integrated. They have vertical integration, which no one else has in the auto business or comes close to have. And, this is, in my view, very important, right? What do we know about other automakers? Look at these 3 things that Tesla does, right? Tesla does lithium refining. They're working on it. They're gonna have it done at Corpus Christi. They do battery making, 4680s ramping. Yes, they're still customers for Chinese batteries, etc. But they're ramping their own battery making, and they make their own engines. They've both made their own engines. Ask yourself, does a legacy automaker do any of that? Well, of course, they don't make their own oil. They don't refine the oil. They don't sell the oil. So the battery making and the lithium refining part equivalent to the gas business, they don't make at all. They don't own that business. And if you know anything about the truck business, you know that oftentimes they don't make the engines, they don't make the trucks. Like those big engines from Cummins, those big pickup trucks in America, they don't make those engines. They outsource that too. Tesla does not do that. But of course, in the case of a legacy ICE car maker, the oil, the electricity, right? The oil to them, the electricity to Tesla. Tesla handles the storage of that electricity, and of course, automakers don't do that for the oil. They don't supply the oil. Okay, the car making is perhaps the one thing that they have in common, right? That a Tesla and a Stellantis has in common. They assemble cars. That they have in common. Then let's talk about the car software, right? Tesla makes its entire car software to the despair of people who want to have Apple Air and Apple Play in the car. But Stellantis and all of these legacy auto, they outsource software making. They don't really make software. They have suppliers make the software. Not the case for Tesla. It's also a software company. They make the software in the car. The elephant in the room, one of the chief advantages of Tesla that is not discussed enough, is the selling of the vehicles. How do they sell the car? Tesla is perhaps, it's not perhaps, it is for sure the largest direct-to-consumer company. They sell direct to the consumer from their website. They don't use a network of dealerships. And of course, and this is the genius, while you have disparate small car shops that fix vehicles, Tesla doesn't do that. They have Tesla service, so they keep the business in-house for fixing the vehicle. So Tesla owns the entire value chain and added value, and Stellantis, on the other hand, is just a bunch of middlemen. There's middlemen everywhere, the biggest middlemen being the dealers, taking away a lot of the profits of a legacy automaker, and there's other consideration. And I want to be very clear about these other considerations. They are quite important. One of them is the workforce, and this is going to sound like an odd question, but do you actually control, but I'm not going to use the term control, I'm going to say, do you actually influence your workforce? What is your actual influence on your workforce? We know that, for example, in the US, unions are very strong in most auto companies aside from Tesla. It's UAW who kind of controls, quote unquote, the workforce. The companies don't even really control their workforce, to the point that one of my favorite metrics that I have fun calculating is the productivity per employee. So you divide revenue, right, total sales, by the number of employee. I get $730,000 per employee for a Tesla employee versus $630,000 for a Stellantis employee. And you may tell me, well, you know what, it's not that bad. It's pretty similar actually in terms of productivity. Except the Stellantis number don't include the suppliers, don't include the dealers' employees, don't include the employees at the service centers. They don't include sometimes even the engine making, while the Tesla employees do all of this. The Tesla employee at $730,000 per employee, they do all of this and much more. All of the projects I just discussed, all of these they do too, right? And the Stellantis employee does this. Car making. So if you were to work out such as like an activity adjusted productivity, it would not even be in the same league. It would not even be comparable. Other consideration, of course, for Tesla is that they own the software. They control their own software, which means they can do updates. They can make the cars better over time. They can leverage future sources of revenue from these cars. That's also very powerful with updates on FSD, upsell, right? One of the big deals of FSD, why is everybody so excited about FSD, is that once FSD is say 100x better than a human, it's very easy for Tesla to have a pop-up window in the car and say, why don't you subscribe to FSD? It's $79 a month. Go ahead and subscribe to FSD. And then boom, you may have 4 million, 5 million people who are ready to pay $70-$80 a month to have a car drive itself. So controlling the software is another consideration that you don't necessarily have when you look at the legacy automaker. And the last one is modern manufacturing. Scale, economies of scale are achieved when you manufacture products in one very large plant, one very large factory. And one question that I ask you is, can a company that is just a bunch of older companies put together, can a company that is a conglomerate, can they easily say, okay, well, we're going to shut down 25 plants and we're going to move everybody to this one town and we're going to have one highly efficient, highly automated plant? Can you actually do that in an old legacy company, or can you not? And the answer to that is more likely than not, in my opinion. The way I look at it is, can you not? There's many other considerations. For example, a company like Stellantis, but I've seen this in all of the auto sector. They have pension liabilities, large, very large for some of them. Pension liabilities. You don't have any of that in Tesla. This is a classic innovators versus legacy situation. This is the classic innovation. The new product comes and the old product unfortunately cannot compete. That's the way I see it. I sleep very well at night owning Tesla. Even if it's down 3% today, it doesn't really matter to me. It's a very long-term hold. I sleep very well at night. And again, nothing bad about Stellantis, but I just, yeah. Anyways, this was my Tesla video, right? So hopefully not as long as some of the other Tesla YouTubers, but hopefully you get an idea of where I stand on Tesla. As a reminder, Tesla is my number one stock that I own here. It is the number one stock I own. Derivatives, options, etc. Anyways, this was not investment advice. No financial advice, just entertainment. Hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.